Hey guys, tonight we are not staying on dry land or sailing safe. Familiar seas? No. Tonight you are stepping onto the shore of an island in the vast Pacific Ocean, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. Look out at that water. It stretches to the horizon. Immense, empty, powerful, a seemingly endless expanse of blue. There are no lighthouses out there marking the way, no GPS satellites orbiting high above, no radio signals to guide you, no shipping lanes filled with other vessels. Just you, your canoe, and the incredible, almost unimaginable challenge of navigating across this watery world to find tiny specks of land you might not even know exist, hundreds or thousands of miles away. It was a feat of navigation, courage, and knowledge that still boggles the modern mind. You probably won't survive this journey into the history of wayfinding without feeling a sense of awe and maybe a healthy dose of respect for anyone who willingly sailed out into that emptiness in a wooden boat, relying only on the signs the ocean and sky provided. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the warm sand, the gentle waves lapping at your feet. The air smells strongly of salt and something green and tropical from the island plants behind you. The sound of the surf is a constant, rhythmic presence. Looking out, the horizon seems impossibly far away, a sharp line where the blue of the ocean meets the pale blue of the sky. This isn't the Mediterranean or the Caribbean, or even the Indian Ocean, vast as they are. This is the Pacific, the largest ocean on Earth, covering more surface area than all of the planet's land masses combined. For the ancestors of the Polynesian people, who originated somewhere in Southeast Asia, likely around Taiwan, this immense ocean wasn't a barrier, it was a pathway. Over thousands of years, their ancestors migrated eastward, first into near Oceania areas like New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, and then in a later, remarkable expansion into the remote Pacific, pushing into the vast, previously uninhabited triangles of Melanesia, Micronesia, and ultimately Polynesia, the region encompassing islands from Hawaii to New Zealand to Easter Island. This was a deliberate expansion, planned voyages of exploration and settlement, not just accidental drift. Ancient Polynesian navigators successfully explored and settled vast regions of the Pacific Ocean over millennia, undertaking deliberate long-distance voyages in sophisticated canoes powered by sail and paddle, covering distances that dwarf the maritime journeys of many contemporary cultures in other parts of the world. This is our mainstream historical fact, underscoring the monumental achievement of their expansion across this immense watery landscape. They found and settled almost every habitable island in the Pacific Triangle, a testament to their incredible seafaring and navigational skills. The sheer scale of the Pacific is difficult to grasp even today, with global maps and satellite images. For ancient mariners, it must have seemed infinite. The distances between islands in remote Oceania can be vast, hundreds, even thousands of miles of open ocean, with nothing but water in every direction. And the islands themselves are tiny targets. Imagine trying to hit a dinner plate with a stone from half a mile away, but the dinner plate is an island maybe 10 or 20 miles wide, and you're trying to find it from 500 or 1,000 miles away, while floating on the surface. Joke number one. Okay, just gotta sail that way for, a month or two. Keep an eye out for a really small rock. A quirky tidbit about the Pacific's emptiness comes from early European explorers. When European ships equipped with compasses and later sextants first ventured into the central Pacific, they were often astonished by the sheer emptiness of the ocean, sailing for weeks or months without seeing any land or other vessels, sometimes even concluding that the maps showing islands there must be wrong. They struggled to comprehend how anyone, using only traditional methods, could reliably navigate such a void and find islands. This highlights just how challenging the environment was. Imagine being an experienced European sailor feeling utterly lost in the vast Pacific, and knowing that people in open canoes had been crisscrossing it for centuries. You stand there now, feeling the gentle rocking of your canoe tied near the shore, the salt spray on your face. You've prepared for weeks, gathered supplies, checked the vessel, perhaps participated in rituals for good fortune. Looking out at that horizon, you feel a mixture of excitement for the journey ahead and a healthy dose of fear for the unknown. It requires immense courage to willingly leave the sight of land, knowing that your survival depends entirely on your knowledge, your skill, and the reliability of your vessel. You contrast this challenge with the ease of modern travel. Booking a flight, using a GPS device in a boat, these have removed much of the uncertainty and raw risk from long-distance travel. Ancient Polynesian voyaging was an entirely different order of challenge. Modern aside, think about the level of courage it would take to get into a small boat today and set off across an ocean with no electronic navigation. Just a compass and a map that might be wildly inaccurate. Now subtract the compass and the potentially inaccurate map, and you have the ancient Polynesian challenge. Scholars still debate the precise timing, origins, and migration routes of the earliest human settlement into the remote regions of the Pacific Ocean, particularly the motivations and sailing capabilities that allowed for such widespread exploration across vast ocean gaps. Was it a single major pulse of exploration, or multiple waves over time were the earliest voyages primarily aimed at settlement? Or was exploration itself a key driver? This is our open scholarly debate phrase. The very beginnings of this incredible seafaring story are still being refined by research. The immense empty Pacific was both the greatest challenge and the canvas upon which Polynesian navigators painted their incredible history of exploration. It demanded a level of skill and knowledge that seems almost mystical today. Joke number 2. You look at the horizon. All right, gotta find that island. It's somewhere past where the sky meets the water, I think. But they possessed that knowledge, passed down through generations, allowing them to read the subtle signs of the ocean and the sky. Joke number 3. You tap the side of your canoe. Ready to sail. Just gotta remember which way is not here. Their mastery of wayfinding allowed them to connect these scattered islands, creating a vast oceanic world tied together by voyages. Facing the immense empty Pacific required incredible courage, profound navigational knowledge, and a suite of sophisticated wayfinding skills. But it also required the right tools, built with ingenuity and deep understanding of the sea. You weren't just swimming or floating precariously on logs or simple rafts like some early theories suggested. Polynesian voyaging was made possible by truly incredible vessels, built with skill and knowledge passed down through generations the ocean-going canoes. These were not the simple dugouts you might imagine for river travel or short trips along a coastline. These were sophisticated engineered vessels designed specifically for long-distance journeys across open ocean, capable of carrying significant loads and withstanding challenging sea conditions for weeks or even months. Polynesian voyagers developed and used two main types of canoes for their long voyages: single-hulled canoes equipped with outriggers for stability, and, crucially, double-hulled canoes, essentially what we might call catamarans today, which were particularly suited for carrying large numbers of people and cargo over vast distances. While single canoes with outriggers were excellent for speed and stability in rough seas, the double-hulled canoes offered greater carrying capacity and a stable platform, vital for voyages of exploration and settlement. Focusing on the double-hulled voyaging canoes, imagine their construction. They were often built from multiple pieces of wood carefully shaped and fitted together. Not always carved from a single log, though large logs formed the basis of the hulls. The planks and sections were expertly stitched together using strong, braided cords made from coconut fiber, called senet. The seams were then caulked and sealed with materials like breadfruit sap or resin to make them watertight. This method of construction required immense skill and precision to create hulls that were both flexible enough to handle the stress of ocean waves and strong enough not to leak. You can imagine the smell of fresh-cut wood, the feel of the rough senet cordage. The stickiness of the resin used for sealing. Sensory details the scent of wood, sennet, and resin. The feel of rough wood and strong, fibrous rope. The visual of expertly fitted and lashed wooden planks. These canoes could be remarkably large. While sizes varied, some voyaging canoes were estimated to be 50, 60, or even up to 100 feet long. This allowed them to carry not just the crew, sometimes numbering dozens of people, but also everything needed to establish a new settlement families. Plants like taro, yams, breadfruit, bananas, sugarcane, coconut, and crucially, animals, pigs, chickens, dogs, rats. Yes, rats came too, perhaps less intentionally. A sturdy platform was built across the two hulls, providing space for cargo, shelter, and the crew. A mast or two supported sails, typically woven from pandanus leaves, often triangular lateen or claw-shaped crab claw designs that allowed the canoes to effectively harness the wind. Sensory details the sound of wind filling the sail, the creaking of the platform and lashings in the waves, the rhythmic splash of water against the hulls. The materials used were primarily the strong, durable hardwoods available on their home islands. Tools in the earlier periods of expansion were made of stone, bone, and shell, adzes for shaping wood, drills, scrapers. Later, limited amounts of metal might have been acquired through trade. Building a complex, multi-part canoe capable of ocean voyages with such tools required incredible craftsmanship, patience, and a deep understanding of boat design and hydrodynamics, passed down through oral traditions. The advantages of the double-hull design for long voyages were clear. The two hulls provided excellent stability in the open ocean, reducing the risk of capsizing even in rough seas. The space on the platform between the hulls offered ample room for carrying the large quantities of food, water, and supplies needed for weeks or months at sea, as well as providing space for people and animals. And with well-designed sails, these canoes could achieve impressive speeds, covering significant distances each day. Polynesian long-distance voyaging was made possible by the construction and masterful use of sophisticated ocean-going canoes, particularly large double-hulled vessels and stable single canoes with outriggers, built from local hardwoods using complex lashing and sealing techniques with tools of stone, bone, and shell, and capable of carrying significant numbers of people, animals, and supplies over vast distances across the Pacific. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing the vessels. A quirky tidbit about canoe construction involves the sennet lashing. The method of braiding and applying the sennet cordage to stitch the canoe parts together was not just functional, it was also often decorative, with intricate patterns that added strength and beauty to the vessel. The strength of this fiber cordage, when expertly made and applied, was astonishing, holding the entire canoe together under the stresses of the open ocean without nails or pegs. Imagine relying on coconut fiber rope to keep your vessel intact thousands of miles from land. There's joke number 1, lost at sea. Don't worry, the sennet lashings are holding, though the captain seems to be questioning our life choices. Scholars debate the average cruising speed and particularly the upwind sailing capabilities of ancient Polynesian voyaging canoes. While some estimates suggest they could achieve speeds of 5 to 10 knots or more under favorable winds, how reliably could they sail against prevailing winds to return to a specific origin point or reach a target island upwind? Did the design of sails and hulls vary significantly over time or between different island groups like Hawaii, Tahiti, New Zealand, reflecting adaptations to different conditions or evolving knowledge? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, understanding the precise performance characteristics of these ancient vessels. Mastering canoe construction was as vital as mastering navigation. These vessels were technological marvels, built with a deep understanding of materials, engineering, and the demands of the sea, allowing Polynesians to push the boundaries of exploration. Joke number 2. You look at the expertly lashed hulls. Whoever built this definitely knew their knots, and probably had very strong fingers. They were more than just boats, They were homes, communities, and the means to connect islands across the vast Pacific. Joke number 3. You imagine a wave hitting the canoe. All right, Senate, do your thing. Don't fail me now. The construction of these incredible canoes was the essential first step in conquering the Pacific. Polynesian voyaging was made possible by incredible ocean-going canoes, built with mastery and skill, vessels capable of carrying people, animals, and supplies across vast stretches of open water. But having the vessel is only part of the story, albeit a crucial part. The bigger question is, why would people willingly get into those canoes and sail out into the immense, empty Pacific, leaving behind the familiar shores and everything they knew for an uncertain future? What were the complex and compelling reasons that drove ancient Polynesians to embark on these incredibly risky voyages of exploration and settlement, pushing into the unknown? It's important to understand that, based on current archaeological, linguistic, and genetic evidence, these were not accidental drift voyages, where canoes were simply blown off course by storms and stumbled upon new islands by chance, though accidental voyages likely happened and may have contributed to some dispersals, particularly over shorter distances. The evidence overwhelmingly points to deliberate, planned expeditions undertaken with purpose and relying on sophisticated navigational knowledge. They intended to find land, and they possessed the skills to return home if necessary, or to report back the findings of new discoveries. The motivations for undertaking such perilous journeys were likely varied and often intertwined. A complex interplay of push factors from their home islands and pull factors towards the unknown horizon. Several key drivers have been identified by scholars. One of the most significant factors was population pressure and resource scarcity. On relatively small, isolated islands with finite land and resources, populations could grow to a point where the available food, fresh water, and building materials like wood for canoes and houses became stretched thin. This could lead to hardship, conflict, and the need to find new places to live. Seeking new, uninhabited islands with abundant resources was a practical solution to overcrowding. Imagine your island community growing, the land getting smaller, and realizing you need to find more space to survive and thrive. Political and social factors also played a role. Disputes over land, power struggles between chiefs or different family groups, or even exile for breaking social laws could lead factions or individuals to leave their home island. Ambitious chiefs might also seek to gain prestige by leading successful voyages of exploration and establishing new territories under their control, expanding their influence and status. These voyages could be a way to resolve internal conflict or pursue social advancement. An innate desire for exploration and curiosity about what lay beyond the horizon was undoubtedly a motivation as well. Humans are explorers by nature, and Polynesian culture highly valued voyaging and navigation skills. Proving one's capability as a navigator or a leader of expeditions brought immense prestige. Voyages might have been undertaken simply to see if more islands existed, to map the oceanic world around them, or to test the limits of their vessels and skills. Sometimes, voyages might have been undertaken specifically to seek trade goods or valuable resources not available on their home island. While trade networks existed between islands, long-distance voyages might have been aimed at finding new sources of important materials like stone for tools, specific types of wood, or other valuable commodities. Even environmental changes could serve as a trigger. Severe storms, tsunamis, volcanic activity, or long-term climate shifts impacting agriculture or sea levels might render a home island less habitable over time, forcing the community to seek a new home. These motivations weren't typically simple, isolated factors. A voyage might be decided upon due to resource scarcity combined with a political dispute, led by an ambitious chief with skilled navigators eager to prove their abilities. The decision to embark on such a risky journey would have been a profound one, involving complex discussions within the community, careful planning, resource gathering, and often spiritual rituals to seek favor from the gods of the sea and sky. The role of the navigators and chiefs was crucial in this decision-making process. The navigators possessed the knowledge to undertake the journey safely or as safely as possible, and the chiefs had the authority and resources to organize and lead the expedition, gathering the people, building or preparing the canoes, and accumulating supplies. Polynesian long-distance voyaging was primarily driven by intentional exploration and planned settlement, motivated by a complex combination of factors including population growth and resource scarcity on home islands, internal political and social dynamics, the innate human desire to explore unknown regions, and the ambition of chiefs. This is our mainstream historical fact. Summarizing the primary drivers, a quirky tidbit about the motivations involves specific origin legends for certain island groups, which sometimes describe unique triggers for the founding voyage. Some legends speak of voyages being initiated by a sign from the gods, a dream guiding the navigator to a specific direction, or even following the flight path of a particular bird seen heading towards the horizon, interpreted as an omen of land in that direction. Imagine embarking on a multi-week ocean voyage simply because you saw a bird fly off into the distance and thought, well, he must be going somewhere interesting. There's joke number one. Okay, team, load the canoe. We're following Steve the Seagull. He looked like he knew where he was going. Scholars debate the relative significance of the various motivations driving Polynesian voyaging across the vast Pacific. Was population pressure the single overwhelming force, pushing people out of necessity, or was the innate human desire to explore, combined with social and political ambition, a more significant or equally important impetus? Particularly after the initial islands were settled and knowledge of the wider ocean grew, did the balance of these motivations change over time? With later voyages being more about resource acquisition or cultural exchange than initial settlement. This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand the primary engine behind this incredible human expansion. The courage required to set sail was immense, but it was often fueled by these powerful push and pull factors. Necessity combined with opportunity, ambition intertwined with a thirst for the unknown. Joke number two. You imagine the planning meeting. So, option A, stay here and argue over the last coconut. Option B, sail into the literal unknown on a wooden boat. Let's start packing the canoe. These complex motivations propelled Polynesian navigators and their communities out into the vast Pacific, relying on their incredible skills to find their way. Joke number three. You look out at the ocean, hope there's a good view from wherever we end up, and less arguments about coconuts. Setting sail into the immense Pacific, driven by necessity or the urge to explore, was a monumental act of courage made possible by incredible canoes. But courage and a good boat alone wouldn't get you there. You needed knowledge, a complex and profound system for finding your way across that vast, empty blue, navigating from a known point to a destination often hundreds or thousands of miles away. And for Polynesian navigators, perhaps the most iconic, beautiful, and reliable tool in their toolkit, especially when the sun went down, was the night sky, using the stars as a compass. Forget the magnetic compass, a European invention unknown to ancient Polynesians. Their compass was etched into their minds, based on generations of observing the heavens. It's often referred to, particularly in simplified modern explanations, drawing on Micronesian systems, as a star compass. But it's more accurately described as a mental framework, a deep understanding of how the stars move across the sky and relate to directions on the ocean's surface. The basic principle is elegantly simple, built on observation. If you watch a star throughout the night, it appears to rise above the eastern horizon and set below the western horizon, following an arc across the sky. Crucially, every star and constellation rises and sets at a very specific point on the horizon, depending on your latitude and the time of year. For a navigator, these rising and setting points are directions. A star that rises directly in front of your canoe at dawn marks a specific direction. If you keep sailing towards the point where that star rises, you are maintaining a straight course. The skill lay in the vast memorized knowledge required. Expert navigators knew the rising and setting points of dozens, even hundreds of individual stars and constellations. They knew how these points shifted subtly depending on the season, as the Earth orbited the Sun. They had a mental map of the celestial sphere and how it related to the 360 degrees of the horizon around their canoe. This wasn't just abstract knowledge, it was deeply practical, tied directly to the directions they needed to sail. Imagine memorizing the exact points on your local horizon where dozens of stars appear and disappear each night, all year round. Modern aside, it's like having to remember the precise GPS coordinates for hundreds of locations, except you have to recall them mentally by recognizing patterns in the sky, without a device. Using the star compass at night involved identifying a key star or constellation that was rising ahead of you or setting behind you, along your intended course direction. You would sail towards the point on the horizon where that star was rising, or away from the point where it was setting. As that star moved higher in the sky, losing its direct bearing relative to the horizon, you would switch to another star that was rising or setting in the same direction, picking up the celestial baton, and continue to follow its point on the horizon. This required continuous observation throughout the night. Sensory details the visual of the vast, unpolluted night sky at sea, filled with countless stars, identifying familiar star patterns, the subtle shift in the canoe's movement to keep a target star steady relative to the bow, the feel of the wind and waves as you adjust course based on celestial cues. While familiar stars like the North Star Polaris or the Southern Cross were useful in certain latitudes, Polaris is less useful closer to the equator, where it sits low on the horizon. While the Southern Cross is a key guide in the Southern Hemisphere, navigators relied on a range of stars across the celestial sphere, using whichever ones were visible near the horizon along their desired bearing at any given time of night or year. A quirky tidbit about memorizing star knowledge involves the methods used to pass it down. This complex information wasn't written down, it was transmitted orally, through generations of navigators. This often involved songs, chants, and stories that encoded the names of stars, their rising and setting points, and their relationship to different directions and islands. Imagine a complex star chart turned into a catchy tune or an epic poem. There's joke number 1. All right, class, repeat after me. The nose of the stingray rises near where the coconut crab sets. Got it. Good. Now let's sing it. Polynesian navigators use sophisticated celestial navigation techniques, relying heavily on extensive memorized knowledge of the precise rising and setting points of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of specific stars and constellations on the horizon, as a complex star compass to maintain a straight course across vast distances at night. Passing this knowledge down through oral traditions. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing the core of their star knowledge. The stars provided a remarkably reliable system for maintaining a straight course. Provided the sky was clear, they don't shift randomly. Their movements are predictable. A constant celestial clock and compass available throughout the night. Scholars debate the precision that could be achieved using the star compass alone over very long voyages. How accurately could navigators maintain a course measured in degrees using these methods? Was the star compass primarily a guide for setting and maintaining a general direction? You mean sailing east-southeast, with other cues used for fine-tuning the approach to a specific target island? Or was it precise enough for making landfall on relatively small targets after thousands of miles? This is our open scholarly debate phrase. Questioning the limits of accuracy in this ancient celestial system? Using the star compass was a profound connection to the cosmos, turning the night sky into a practical guide across the vast ocean. It required incredible memory, observational skill, and the patience to watch the slow, majestic movement of the stars. Joke number 2. You look up at the sky? Okay, little star, you're my navigation partner for the next hour. Don't wander off. It was a cornerstone of Polynesian wayfinding, turning the darkness of night into a path illuminated by celestial light. Joke number 3. You point to a star. See that one? That's the one that tells us we're mostly going the right way. Hopefully. The night sky, a vast celestial compass guided by memorized rising and setting points, was a primary guide for Polynesian navigators, provided the stars were visible. But the stars fade with the dawn, And for roughly half of the 24-hour cycle, the sky is dominated by another, even brighter celestial body, one that also served as a crucial, constant navigational tool, the sun. When the stars disappeared with the morning light, or were hidden by clouds at night, the sun took over as the primary celestial guide. Navigators were intimately familiar with the sun's path across the sky. They knew it rose generally in the east and set generally in the west, but they also knew its exact rising and setting points on the horizon, and its height in the sky at noon, varied significantly throughout the year and depending on their latitude. This complex knowledge was essential for accurate navigation. Using the sun during the day involved tracking its arc across the sky from horizon to horizon. Knowing the approximate time of day estimated by the sun's height allowed the navigator to know which direction the sun's position corresponded to. For instance, if they were sailing south in the northern hemisphere, they would know the sun would be on their left for much of the day. The sun's position at noon, when it reached its highest point in the sky, was particularly important as it indicated the direction of true north or south, depending on the hemisphere. This allowed for checks on their overall bearing. The navigator would maintain a straight course by keeping the sun at a specific angle relative to the canoe's direction. They might use the edge of the canoe, a point on the rigging, or even just their own body parts as temporary pointers, constantly adjusting the canoe's heading to keep the sun aligned correctly. Imagine focusing intently on the bright disk, or even just sensing its direction behind you, and subtly adjusting the rudder to stay true to your intended course. Sensory details the warmth of the sun on your skin, shifting as the day progresses, the visual glare of the sun on the water, observing the shadow cast by the mast or your own body on the deck, the feel of the canoe turning as you make slight course corrections. Even when clouds obscured the sun, a skilled navigator could often still sense its presence and direction. They could feel its warmth on different parts of their body, using their skin as a sensor. They could observe subtle differences in the brightness of the clouds. Knowing the sun was behind the brightest part, this ability to feel the sun's direction through cloud cover was a crucial skill for maintaining course when direct visual cues were absent. They also used the sun's position to estimate the time of day, crucial for knowing which direction the sun corresponded to. They knew roughly how high the sun would be at mid-morning, noon, and mid-afternoon, based on the time of year and their latitude. This ancient skill of time estimation by celestial observation was vital for navigation. Polynesian navigators were highly skilled at using the sun's position and its predictable arc across the sky throughout the day, including knowing its precise rising and setting points and its height and direction at noon, as a primary celestial navigational tool for maintaining course when stars were not visible. This is our mainstream historical fact, outlining the sun's critical role. A quirky tidbit about sun tracking involves specific methods used to determine the exact noon position. Some navigators reportedly used simple devices, like observing the length or direction of the shortest shadow cast by a vertical stick placed on the deck at noon. The shadow is shortest and points towards north-south, or watching when the sun reached its highest point relative to a fixed point on the canoe's rigging. These simple, practical astronomical observations allowed for accurate determination of the north-south line. Imagine carefully watching the shadow of a stick to ensure you're sailing towards the equator or away from it. There's joke number one. Okay, the sun is exactly there. So, north is mind somewhere that way, I hope. The sun provided a constant, reliable guide throughout the daylight hours, much like the stars did at night, provided it wasn't completely obscured by thick clouds for extended periods. Scholars debate the accuracy and limitations of Polynesian sun navigation, especially when trying to maintain a very specific bearing compared to the precision that could potentially be achieved with the star compass at night, assuming clear skies. Was sun navigation primarily for setting and maintaining a general direction, with more precise adjustments made at night or using other cues? Or could navigators use the sun's position and arc to hold a very tight course throughout the day, even for making landfall on small targets? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, questioning the limits of accuracy in this ancient solar system. Using the sun as a navigational tool required constant observation, knowledge of its movements throughout the year, and the ability to interpret its position even when partially hidden. It was a vital complement to star navigation, ensuring that whether by day or night, the heavens provided a guide across the vast ocean. Joke number 2. You shield your eyes, looking at the sun. All right, Mr. Sun, you're in charge now. Don't steer us wrong. It was a skill that turned the bright daytime sky into a navigable map. Joke number 3. You imagine accidentally sailing directly towards the sun. Well, this seems warm. Are we sure this is the right way to New Zealand? By day and night, the heavens provided a guide. The sun and the stars, their precise movements and positions etched into the navigator's mind, a celestial clock and compass. But the sky isn't always clear. Storm clouds can gather, hiding the sun, obscuring the stars for hours or even days. In those moments, when the celestial guides are lost, Polynesian navigators didn't simply drift, they turned to another constant and equally profound source of information, the ocean itself. Specifically, reading the swells. Understanding ocean swells is a subtle art. You need to differentiate them from local wind waves, the choppy, inconsistent waves generated by the immediate wind blowing across the water's surface. Swells, on the other hand, are larger, more regular, long-period waves generated by distant weather systems, sometimes thousands of miles away. Once generated, they travel outwards in consistent patterns, like ripples from a stone dropped in a pond, carrying the memory of the distant wind that created them. These consistent, underlying swells are the key for navigation. Navigators learn to recognize the direction of not just the primary swell often generated by the prevailing trade winds, but also secondary and even tertiary swells coming from different directions, generated by distant storms or wind patterns. By feeling the way the canoe rose and fell with these different swell patterns, even when the surface was also covered in choppy local waves, they could discern the underlying direction of the swells. They knew that a particular swell direction corresponded to a specific bearing. For example, a certain swell might always come from the direction of their home island, or from the direction of their target island chain. By orienting the canoe to cut through a specific swell at a particular angle, or by keeping a certain swell consistently hitting the canoe on a specific side, navigators could maintain a straight course even under a completely overcast sky. Imagine sitting in the canoe, perhaps at night with no stars visible, focusing solely on the feeling of the hull being lifted and lowered by the swells, feeling their direction relative to your body, and subtly adjusting the steering paddle to keep that feeling consistent, knowing you are staying on course. Sensory details the distinct, rhythmic feeling of the canoe rising and falling with the long swells, different from choppy waves, the sound of the swells passing under the hull, the subtle feel of the steering paddle in your hands as you adjust your angle to the swell, the spray from a larger swell cresting nearby. Swells are more reliable for direction than local wind waves, as local wind can change direction frequently. Deep ocean swells, however, maintain their direction for long periods, making them a constant but dependable compass, accessible day and night. Rain or shine well, cloud or no cloud. Oh. But swells aren't just for maintaining course in open ocean. They are also crucial for finding land. When deep ocean swells encounter an island or an island chain, they are disrupted. They bend around the landmass, they reflect back outwards, and they create complex, interacting patterns of waves and confused seas around the island. A skilled navigator, miles or even tens of miles away from an island long before it is visible, could detect these subtle changes in the swell patterns, feeling confused seas, noticing swells coming from unexpected directions, or observing smaller wave patterns generated by the interaction of the main swell with the distant land. These were signs that land was near, even if still below the horizon. This ability to read the subtle language of the ocean's surface, to interpret its bumps and wrinkles as indicators of distant geography, was a vital skill for making landfall on tiny targets. This profound understanding and sensitivity to the ocean's movements required incredible training and countless hours spent at sea. It became an intuitive knowledge, almost like a sixth sense. Navigators learned to feel the ocean's rhythm and discern the layers of wave patterns operating simultaneously. A quirky tidbit about teaching swell reading involves mnemonic devices and physical representations. While Polynesian wayfinding knowledge was primarily oral, in some Micronesian cultures who shared related wayfinding traditions, navigators used stick charts, lattice-like arrangements of sticks tied together, representing swell patterns, island shells, and canoe courses. While true stick charts were not used in Polynesia in the same way, they illustrate the concept of externalizing and teaching this complex, seemingly abstract knowledge of how swells behave. Imagine explaining complex wave physics using just sticks and shells. There's joke number one. All right, this big stick is the main swell. This little shell is the island. If the big stick hits the little shell like this, clacks, sticks, you're probably going the wrong way. Polynesian navigators possessed a profound and intricate understanding of ocean swells, using their consistent direction, patterns, and interactions with distant landmasses as vital navigational cues for both maintaining a straight course, particularly when celestial guides were unavailable, and crucially, for detecting the presence of islands below the horizon. This is our mainstream historical fact, cementing the importance of swell navigation. Scholars debate the relative primacy and independence of Polynesian swell navigation versus celestial navigation sun and stars. Was one system considered the primary guide, with the other as a backup? Or were swell reading and celestial observation equally vital and constantly cross-referenced, with navigators using both simultaneously to confirm their position and direction? Could swell patterns alone provide enough information for accurate long-distance navigation and successful landfall without any celestial cues? Perhaps in consistently overcast conditions. This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to determine how these different elements of the navigation system were weighted and relied upon in practice. Reading the ocean swells was a fundamental intuitive skill that turned the apparent chaos of the waves into a constant compass and a way to see land beyond the horizon. It required a deep connection to the ocean and a sensitivity that went beyond mere observation. Joke number two, you feel a specific pattern of swells. Ah, yes, the definitely not going in circles swell. It was a vital, non-celestial method in the navigator's arsenal. Joke number three. You imagine telling someone today you navigate by waves. Yeah, the ocean just tells me where to go. Sometimes it's grumpy. Though, the ocean surface itself, with its underlying consistent swell patterns, provided a constant compass even when the sky was hidden by clouds. But there's another constant element in the open ocean, one that not only powers your canoe, pushing the sail and guiding your movement, but also speaks to you directly about direction, the wind. Wind is, of course, essential for sailing. Without it, your double-hulled canoe or outrigger would be a very heavy paddle-powered vessel, making long distances incredibly difficult. But the wind is more than just propulsion. It provides a constant, palpable navigational cue. As a navigator, you develop an acute sensitivity to the wind, its direction, its strength, its feel on your skin. You feel the wind on your face, on your arms, on the back of your neck. You notice which side of the canoe the wind is coming from, or where it's blowing towards. By feeling the wind's direction relative to your canoe's heading, you gain essential information about your current bearing. If the wind is a steady trade wind known to blow consistently from a specific general direction, like the northeast or southeast in certain latitudes, it provides a reliable reference point. Imagine feeling the wind pressure equally on both ears when sailing directly into it, or feeling it primarily on one cheek when sailing across it. Sensory details the feel of wind pressure on different parts of your face and body, the sound of wind whistling through the rigging or flapping the sail, the visual of ripples, whitecaps, or larger waves generated by the immediate wind on the water surface. You also observe the wind's effect on your sail and the water. The way the sail fills or slacks tells you how directly you are sailing relative to the wind. The direction of the local wind waves the choppy waves on the surface. Distinct from deep ocean swells is a direct indicator of the immediate wind direction. This allows you to cross-reference the feeling of the wind on your skin with visual cues on the water. Wind direction relates closely to swell patterns, but they provide different types of information. Swells tell you about distant, consistent conditions and directions. Local wind waves tell you about the immediate wind. A navigator uses both the swell for the underlying constant compass and the wind and its corresponding local waves to understand local conditions, confirm their bearing, and adjust the sail for optimal speed and course. Polynesian navigators developed names for different wind directions and speeds, tying them into their mental compass system. They knew the typical wind patterns for different regions of the Pacific and different seasons of the year. Knowing that a specific wind, like the Alizé or trade wind, usually blows from a certain quadrant was a vital piece of knowledge for planning voyages and maintaining direction. A quirky tidbit about sensing wind direction involves specific techniques beyond just feeling it on your face. Some navigators would briefly wet a finger and hold it up. The side of the finger where the water evaporated fastest indicated the direction the wind was coming from due to the cooling effect of evaporation. Simple, effective, and relying only on basic physics and a bit of moisture. Imagine wetting your finger in the middle of the ocean to check the wind. There's joke number 1. Checking the wind? Yep, finger feels cold on this side. Still going. Mostly that way? Good. Polynesian navigators utilized the direction and feel of the wind on their skin and observed its effects on their sails and the water surface as an ongoing and vital navigational cue to help maintain course. Adjust sail and understand local conditions. Particularly relevant in regions dominated by consistent trade winds. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing the use of wind as a guide. While wind direction is a constant source of information, it also presents challenges. Local winds can shift, sometimes rapidly, or be influenced by nearby islands or weather systems. Relying solely on wind direction could lead you off course. Scholars debate the reliability and primary function of wind cues in Polynesian wayfinding compared to celestial navigation or reading swells. Was wind primarily used for cross-referencing the bearing derived from stars or swells, or for understanding local weather and sail trim? Or did skilled navigators in certain conditions or regions use wind as a primary directional guide for setting a course? Perhaps in combination with other cues, this is our open scholarly debate phrase. Understanding how wind fit into the hierarchy of navigational information. Sensing the wind was a fundamental, intuitive skill, an ongoing conversation with the atmosphere. It required constant awareness and interpretation. Joke number 2. You adjust the sail based on the wind's feel. All right, wind. Where are we heading? You're in charge of propulsion. I'm in charge of listening. It provided essential directional information, especially when combined with reading the swells and the celestial guides. Joke number 3. You imagine trying to explain it today. Yeah, I just feel the wind. It tells me where to go. And also if I need a jacket. The ocean surface itself, with its underlying consistent swell patterns, provided a constant compass even when the sky was hidden. The wind spoke of direction and conditions, guiding the sail. But even when the sky is cloudy and hides the stars and sun, seemingly obscuring the celestial guides entirely, the clouds themselves can also provide a vital, often subtle clue, indicating something hidden just below the horizon. Land. The ingenious art of interpreting cloud formations was another crucial skill in the Polynesian navigator's arsenal. While large, dark clouds can signal bad weather and hide the sky's direct navigational cues, certain types of clouds, observed carefully, can reliably indicate the presence of land even when the landmass itself is too far away to be seen. Polynesian navigators were masters at reading these subtle signs in the sky, turning potential visual obstacles into helpful indicators. One key type of cloud indicator is the island cloud cap, or cloud cap. Islands, especially high volcanic islands with significant elevation, interrupt the flow of wind and create updrafts of warm air rising from the heated land surface. As this warm, moist air ascends, it cools and causes the moisture within it to condense, forming clouds that tend to sit relatively stationary above or slightly downwind of the island. From a distance, a navigator could spot these clouds appearing fixed in the sky. Unlike normal weather clouds that drift with the wind, their presence, size, and shape could indicate the direction and even perhaps the size of a hidden island below the horizon. Imagine seeing a cloud that just stays in one place, day after day, while all the other clouds drift past, a strong sign that there's something solid underneath it. Sensory details the visual of a distinct, stationary cloud shape on the horizon, perhaps brighter or whiter than the surrounding sky. The feeling of hope or excitement rising upon spotting a potential island cloud. Another, even more subtle. Cloud Q is particularly useful for detecting low-lying islands and atolls ring-shaped coral reefs with lagoons. Even when the land is too flat and low to create a significant cloud cap, the light reflecting off a bright sandy beach or, crucially, the shallow, light-colored water of a lagoon within an atoll can be reflected upwards onto the underside of clouds positioned directly above the island, even if those clouds are far away. This reflection can make the bottom of the clouds appear brighter or lighter than the clouds around them, creating a subtle cloud glow or lagoon blink that might be visible from miles away. It's like the island's lagoon is sending a faint, shimmering signal into the sky, reflected for the navigator to see. Sensory details the visual of a patch of cloud on the horizon that seems subtly brighter or lighter underneath. The feeling of intense focus needed to discern this subtle difference. Interpreting these cloud formations required immense experience and acute observational skills. A navigator needed to be able to differentiate between island-indicating clouds and normal weather clouds, which might look similar to the untrained eye but behave differently. Weather clouds drift and change shape predictably with the wind, while island clouds appear anchored. Knowing the typical weather patterns of a region also helped. An unusual cloud formation in a normally clear sky might be more significant. These cloud cues were particularly valuable because they allowed navigators to detect the presence of land before the island itself became visible above the horizon. This extended their effective range of sight, giving them precious time to adjust their course and make a confident approach towards the unseen landmass. A quirky tidbit about cloud reading involves specific traditional names given to certain cloud formations or patterns that indicated land. Polynesian wayfinding knowledge included a complex lexicon for describing and interpreting different cloud types and their significance for navigation. There were specific names for the persistent cloud caps over high islands, or for the subtle glow above atolls, sometimes linking the shape or color of the cloud to characteristics of the land below. Imagine learning dozens of different names for clouds, each one loaded with navigational information. There's joke number 1. Ah yes, the Cumulus Coconudus Finder formation. We must be close. Polynesian navigators were highly skilled at detecting the presence of islands below the horizon by observing and interpreting specific cloud formations. Primarily stationary island caps, forming above high islands due to orographic lift, and the subtle cloud glow, created by light reflecting off lagoons below clouds over low-lying atolls, greatly extending their effective range of land detection. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing their mastery of cloud reading. Scholars debate the effective range and reliability of using cloud formations alone for consistently detecting islands in Polynesian wayfinding, particularly for small or low-lying islands that might not produce a prominent cloud cap or glow. How far away could islands reliably be detected using cloud cues? Was it dozens of miles? Or potentially further under ideal conditions? Was this method reliable enough to be the primary means of final approach and landfall? Or was it primarily a welcome secondary indicator that confirmed proximity after using other methods to get close? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, questioning the practical limits of this fascinating technique. Interpreting cloud formations was a subtle but powerful skill that gave navigators eyes beyond the visible horizon. It turned the sky itself into a source of information about the land hidden below. Joke number 2. You point to a distant cloud. See that one? That one looks like it might have snacks. It was a key non-celestial indicator, adding another layer to their profound understanding of the natural world as a navigational guide. Joke number 3. You imagine explaining it today. Yeah, I just read the clouds. They're like nature's radar, but fluffier. The sea provided a constant compass through its swells, guiding the canoe even when the sky was hidden. The wind spoke of direction and conditions. Even the clouds held secrets of unseen land, signaling islands below the horizon. But the vast ocean is teeming with life, and these living creatures, too, provided crucial navigational information, acting as natural, biological indicators of proximity to land. Polynesian navigators were expert observers of the natural world around them, possessing a deep understanding of marine ecosystems and the behavior of various species. They knew that certain birds and marine animals were associated with specific environments. Some lived their entire lives in the deep open ocean, while others relied on land for nesting, roosting, or feeding in coastal or reef areas. Observing the presence, type, and behavior of these creatures could tell a navigator whether they were still in the deep, empty ocean or nearing a landmass or reef. The most prominent biological indicators were often seabirds. Navigators learned to distinguish between different species. Some seabirds, like petrels or albatrosses, are truly oceanic and can be found thousands of miles from land. Seeing them didn't necessarily mean land was near, but other species, such as terns, noddies, boobies, and certain types of frigate birds, are land-seeking birds. They spend their days fishing in the ocean but return to land islands or rocky outcrops to nest, roost, and rest, typically staying within a certain range of their home base. Sensory details the visual of seabirds circling overhead or flying low over the water, the sound of their calls carrying on the wind, the smell of salt, and perhaps a distant hint of guano if near a bird colony. Crucially, navigators would observe the flight patterns of these land-seeking birds. In the morning, as the sun rose, these birds would typically fly outwards from the island, heading out to sea to fish. In the late afternoon or evening, as the sun began to set, they would fly inwards, returning to their nests or roosting sites on the island. By observing the direction these birds were consistently flying, a navigator could determine the direction of the nearest land, even if it was still below the horizon. Following birds heading home in the evening was a classic technique for finding land. Imagine scanning the sky at dusk, hoping to see the silhouette of a bird flying purposefully in one direction, a living arrow pointing towards your destination. The typical range of these land-seeking birds from their island base was known, roughly 20 to 50 miles, depending on the species and the bird's needs. Seeing a large number of these birds, or seeing them flying purposefully in a consistent direction, was a strong indication that land was within that range. Beyond birds, marine life also offered clues. Certain types of fish, particularly reef fish, or those that inhabit shallower coastal waters, would not typically be found in the deep open ocean. Seeing these specific species near the canoe could indicate proximity to a reef or a coastline. Unusual concentrations of fish or other marine animals might also suggest nearby land or a seamount rising from the deep. Whales and dolphins, while oceanic, sometimes follow coastlines or congregate in areas influenced by land. Finding ocean debris like driftwood, certain types of floating seaweed, or land plants washing up could also indicate that land was somewhere upstream from the debris' current position, carried out by currents. This required knowing what types of debris were specific to land versus floating ocean vegetation. Reading biological cues required extensive, generations-deep knowledge of marine ecosystems and animal behavior. Navigators learned to identify species, understand their habits, and interpret subtle observations. It wasn't just seeing a bird, it was knowing what kind of bird it was, what time of day it was, and what direction it was flying. A quirky tidbit about animal cues involves a very specific belief in some traditions about using trained birds. While this is debated and perhaps more legendary than common practice, Some accounts mention navigators carrying frigate birds or other birds on their voyages and releasing them at sea. If the bird flew purposefully in one direction, it was believed to be heading towards the nearest land, and the navigator would follow. Imagine carrying a bird hundreds of miles just to see which way it flies for directions. There's joke number one. All right, Reginald, the fate of the expedition rests on you. Don't just fly in a circle, and please, no false advertising. Polynesian navigators were expert observers of the natural world, possessing extensive knowledge of marine ecosystems and animal behavior. They utilized the presence and behavior of specific seabirds like terns and noddies and types of marine life like reef fish, as well as debris like driftwood and certain types of seaweed, as reliable biological indicators of proximity to land, particularly when navigating near potential islands. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing their use of living guides. Scholars debate the reliability and effective detection range of using biological cues like birds and marine life for finding islands, particularly for small or very distant atolls. Were these cues primarily reliable for confirming proximity when already within a few dozen miles of land? Primarily used in the final stages of approach, after using celestial or swell navigation to get close? Or could experienced navigators use these subtle signs to sense land from a more significant distance under favorable conditions? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, questioning how far and how reliably nature's living compass extended their range. Using birds, marine life, and debris as navigational cues required patience, ecological knowledge, and constant observation. It was a skill that turned the ocean's inhabitants into messengers of land, adding another layer to their profound connection with the natural world. Joke number two, you see a specific type of fish near the canoe. Hello there, little guy. Are we close to shore? Give me a fin if the snacks are good there. It completed the suite of natural indicators used by wayfinders alongside the stars: sun, swells, wind, and clouds. Joke number three, you watch a bird fly towards the horizon. Well, looks like dinner's that way. And hopefully, land. Birds flying purposefully towards the horizon, the subtle signs from marine life near the surface. Debris washing up on the water. These were living indicators of land nearby, offering crucial clues when the vast blue seemed empty. But Polynesian navigators also read even more subtle cues from the ocean itself. Interpreting delicate changes in its very appearance and feel the color and temperature of the water, in the deep, open ocean, hundreds or thousands of miles from any landmass, the water typically has a consistent, deep blue color and a relatively stable temperature influenced by currents and overall climate. But as you approach land, especially islands surrounded by shallow reefs or lagoons, the water's characteristics can change. Navigators were sensitive to these subtle variations. One cue was watercolor. While the open ocean is deep blue, shallower waters, particularly over coral reefs or sandy bottoms, can appear lighter blue, turquoise, or even greenish. Water influenced by sediment washed from land, especially after rain, might appear more milky or brownish closer to shore. By carefully observing the shades of blue and green and spotting changes in the water's clarity or color, navigators could potentially detect the presence of reefs or land below the horizon, even if the changes were very subtle in deep water before reaching visible shallows. Imagine staring at the seemingly uniform blue and discerning a very faint, lighter patch that hints at something below the surface or ahead. Sensory details the visual shift from deep indigo blue to a lighter azure or greenish hue on the water surface, the way sunlight interacts with different watercolors. Another subtle indicator was water temperature. The temperature of the surface water in the open ocean is influenced by large-scale currents and atmospheric conditions. However, proximity to land, especially shallow lagoons which can heat up under the sun, or localized currents created by land masses, might cause small, detectable changes in water temperature. A navigator might periodically dip their hand into the water, or even jump in for a moment carefully, when the canoe was still, to feel for these minute temperature differences. Warmer water might suggest shallower areas or a lagoon nearby, while cooler water could indicate deeper ocean or specific currents. Sensory details the feel of the water's temperature on your hand or skin. Sensing a subtle difference from the surrounding air temperature, the feeling of being immersed if checking temperature more thoroughly. Other subtle water cues might include changes in salinity, though detecting very small changes in the open ocean would be difficult without specific tools. At night, changes in bioluminescence, the faint ethereal glow produced by microscopic organisms in the water, might be observed. Sometimes changes in bioluminescence patterns or intensity could be associated with different types of water found near reefs or in currents influenced by land. Sensory details the visual of faint, shimmering light in the water at night, the feeling of mystery the glow evokes. These subtle cues were not typically used in isolation for setting a course across vast distances like stars or swells. They were often used in the final stages of an approach to land, or when celestial guides were obscured and swell patterns were ambiguous. They required an extremely high level of observational skill, sensitivity, and experience to interpret correctly. It was like listening for the ocean's quietest whispers. A quirky tidbit about reading watercolor involves specific traditional names given to different shades and patterns of ocean water that indicated depth or proximity to reefs or land. Polynesian navigational knowledge included a rich vocabulary for describing the precise appearance of the water surface under different conditions and light. Translating these visual cues into information about the environment below or ahead, imagine having a dozen different names just for variations of the color blue on the ocean. There's joke number one. Ah, yes. This is the slightly less blue than yesterday, but still quite blue water. Means something. Polynesian navigators were sensitive to subtle changes in the color, yeah, shifts in blue-green hues and temperature of ocean water, interpreting these variations as potential indicators of changing depth, the presence of underwater reefs, or proximity to land, adding these subtle observations to their suite of natural navigation cues. This is our mainstream historical fact. Acknowledging the use of these cues, scholars debate the reliability and practical significance of using these very subtle watercolor and temperature changes as navigational cues, particularly for consistently detecting land or reefs from significant distances. Were these cues primarily used for confirming proximity when already very close to land or a reef? Essentially in the final stages of approach, or could experienced navigators truly gain useful directional or positional information from these subtle signs much further out to sea when other cues were unavailable? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to determine how much these quiet indicators truly contributed to successful navigation compared to the more obvious signs. Reading watercolor and temperature required an almost intuitive connection with the ocean, a sensitivity that went beyond typical observation. It was a skill used to extract information from the most basic properties of the water itself. Joke number two. You dip your hand in the water. Temperature feels like slightly warmer than the rest of the ocean. Definitely land nearby, or maybe just a whale. These subtle cues were part of the layered system of knowledge that allowed Polynesian navigators to find their way across the vast Pacific. Joke number three. You look at the water. Looks like it's having a slightly lighter blue day. Must be in a good mood. We've explored the incredible natural cues Polynesian navigators read from the sky, the sea, the wind, and the living world. Stars, sun, swells, wind, clouds, birds, marine life, subtle changes in watercolor and temperature. But these were just the individual pieces of information, the scattered dots of data, the system that connected them all, that turned these varied observations into a coherent path across the vast ocean. The true engine of wayfinding was the navigator's mind, their vast internal mental map of the Pacific. This complex, multi-layered knowledge system, encompassing celestial navigation, swell reading, weather patterns, biological indicators, and detailed knowledge of islands and routes, was not written down in charts or books like European navigation. It was entirely memorized and transmitted from one generation of navigators to the next, solely through rigorous oral tradition. The entire body of knowledge needed to sail thousands of miles and find a tiny island was carried in the navigator's head. Imagine holding all of that information in your mind, the rising and setting points of dozens, even hundreds, of stars throughout the year, their paths across the sky, how they relate to directions on the ocean, the patterns of primary and secondary swells in different parts of the Pacific, how they interact with wind, how they bend around islands. The typical wind directions and characteristics for different regions and seasons, the types of clouds that signal land, the flight patterns of different seabirds, the specific marine life that indicate proximity to reefs or shore, the relative positions of islands, the distances between them measured in days or weeks of sailing, the appearance of different islands as you approach them, their profile, cloud caps, lagoon glow. It was a truly encyclopedic amount of geographical and environmental data, internalized and ready for use at any moment. The training of a navigator was a demanding, lifelong undertaking, often starting from a very young age. Boys and sometimes girls, though historical accounts focus more on men, would begin as apprentices under a master navigator, often a relative, learning by constant observation, listening, and repetition. They would spend hours on land, learning the star compass, watching the stars rise and set from a fixed point, reciting names and directions. They would accompany their masters on shorter voyages, observing how the master read the swells, the wind, the clouds, the birds, how they handled the canoe. Memorization was key. To retain such a vast amount of complex data, navigators used sophisticated mnemonic devices, techniques to aid memory. This included chants, songs, and stories that encoded detailed information about star paths, specific routes between islands, the characteristics of different islands and the signs to look for. A complex star path might be described in a rhythmic chant, the sequence of islands on a long route sung as a story. These oral traditions were not just entertainment, they were the textbooks and charts of Polynesian wayfinding, passed down verbatim through generations of rigorous training. A quirky tidbit about these mnemonic devices involves specific examples found in oral traditions. Some chants describe specific houses or pathways for stars across the sky, relating them to directions. Others list sequences of islands on a route, describing what to look for upon approach. There are chants specifically about different types of swells and how to read them, or about the behavior of certain birds. Imagine learning to navigate by singing a long, detailed song about the stars and waves. There's joke number 1. All right, crew, time for the mid-ocean sing-along. Everyone grab a paddle and join in. The Southern Cross is high above. The swells come from the west they rove. The ability to recall and apply this vast knowledge accurately in real time, often under challenging conditions at sea, in the dark, in rough weather, dealing with fatigue or seasickness, was the ultimate test of a navigator's training. Their performance directly impacted the survival of everyone on the canoe. This responsibility gave master navigators a position of immense respect and authority within their communities. They were keepers of vital cultural knowledge and the key to future prosperity and survival. The complex and extensive knowledge system of Polynesian wayfinding, encompassing detailed understanding of celestial navigation, swell reading, wind patterns, weather interpretation, biological indicators, and island characteristics, was not recorded in written form but was memorized and transmitted across generations of navigators solely through rigorous oral tradition, utilizing sophisticated mnemonic techniques like chants, songs, and stories. This is our mainstream historical fact, highlighting the unique nature of their knowledge system. Scholars debate the level of standardization versus regional variation in Polynesian wayfinding knowledge systems across different island groups. While core principles were likely shared throughout Polynesia, were there significant differences in the specific star names, the exact star compass orientations, the classification of swells, or the details of island recognition techniques used by navigators in Hawaii compared to those in New Zealand or Tahiti, reflecting regional adaptations and independent development of knowledge? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand if there was one unified wayfinding system or multiple variations on a theme. The navigator's mental map was a marvel of human memory and intellect, a testament to the power of oral tradition to preserve and transmit complex scientific knowledge across vast stretches of time and space. It turned the seemingly empty Pacific into a navigable world, filled with invisible pathways and recognizable signs. Joke number 2. You pat your head. All the maps right here. No batteries required. It was the system that allowed Polynesians to populate the largest ocean on Earth. Joke number 3. You imagine taking notes. Okay. Swell pattern means turn left at the big blue bit. Got it. The navigator held the knowledge. A vast mental map linking islands across the immense ocean. The wisdom to read the stars, sun, swells, wind, clouds, and living things. But all that knowledge, all that courage, had to be put into practice aboard the vessels themselves, facing the constant reality of life at sea for weeks or months on end. What was it truly like to live on a double canoe during one of these epic voyages? A small, self-contained world, carrying the hopes of a community across the vast, empty blue. Life aboard a Polynesian voyaging canoe during a long expedition was demanding, uncomfortable, and a constant test of endurance. Imagine being on a vessel maybe 50 or 60 feet long, sharing limited space with potentially dozens of people, plus animals and all the supplies needed to survive and establish a new settlement. For weeks, maybe even months, you would be surrounded by nothing but ocean, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Space was at a premium on the platform stretched between the two hulls. This area served as the living space, the workspace, and the storage area. It was constantly exposed to the elements. You felt the sun beating down during the day, the wind whipping past, the spray from the waves constantly washing over the deck, and the rain when storms hit. There was little true shelter. Maybe a small thatched structure for protection from sun and rain, but largely, you lived in the open, adapting to the rhythm of the weather and the sea. Sensory details the constant feel of salt spray on your skin, the smell of salt, sea, damp wood, and the unique scent of animals and people in close quarters. The relentless rocking motion of the canoe, the feel of rain or sun on your face. Daily life revolved around maintaining the course, managing resources, and keeping the vessel and its inhabitants healthy. Routines for navigating were constant watching the stars at night, tracking the sun by day, feeling the swells and wind, scanning the horizon for any sign of land clouds. Birds. Sail trim had to be constantly adjusted to make the best use of the wind, a task requiring coordination among the crew. Sleeping was done in shifts, often in cramped conditions on the platform or within the hulls themselves if space allowed. Deep, restful sleep would have been difficult with the constant motion. Noise and exposure, food and water were strictly rationed. Supplies brought from the home island had to last the entire journey. Food would primarily consist of dried or preserved items like breadfruit, taro, yams, and possibly dried fish or meat. Water, carried in gourds or bamboo containers, was the most precious resource, managed with extreme care. Sensory details the taste of salt on your lips constantly, the limited taste of rationed food, the cool, vital feel of fresh water, the smell of cooking small, quick meals on a simple fire pit aboard. Other tasks included maintaining the canoe, checking lashings, bailing out water from the hulls, making running repairs. Waste management had to be handled carefully to maintain hygiene in close quarters. Care was also given to the plants brought for cultivation kept in baskets with soil and the animals' pigs. Chickens, dogs carried for food and breeding, often in small pens or tied securely on deck. The challenges were immense. Weather could be a constant threat, sudden squalls, prolonged storms with high waves and strong winds that tested the canoe's structure and the crew's endurance, or frustrating doldrums with no wind at all, leaving you drifting under a hot sun. Sickness was a risk in close quarters with limited hygiene and resources. Fatigue and boredom could wear on morale. Conflicts could arise between people living in such proximity under stress. And the constant anxiety of managing finite resources, running low on food, or worse, water, was an ever present worry. The sounds of the voyage were a constant soundtrack, the wind whistling in the rigging, the rhythmic slap or rush of waves against the hulls, the creaking of the wooden structure and sennit lashings under stress, the calls of seabirds, the sounds of the animals being carried, and the voices of the crew talking, singing perhaps navigational chants, giving instructions, or simply grumbling. Sensory details the cacophony of sounds, natural and human-animal, that were your constant companions. Life aboard was a profound exercise in interdependence. Everyone relied on the navigators to find the way. Everyone relied on the canoe builder's skill for the vessel's integrity. Everyone relied on each other for help with sail handling, repairs, and managing daily life. The canoe was a microcosm of the community, working together for survival and a shared future. Life aboard Polynesian voyaging canoes during long expeditions across the open Pacific was incredibly demanding, characterized by living in close quarters. Constant exposure to the elements, sun, wind, rain, spray, strict rationing of food and water supplies, and essential cooperation and interdependence among the crew and passengers over weeks or months at sea with no sight of land. This is our mainstream historical fact, summarizing the rigors of the voyage. A quirky tidbit about life aboard involves specific routines for hygiene or maintaining health in these challenging conditions. Lacking fresh water for bathing, people would often wash in the sea, using the constant wash of salt spray as a natural cleanser. Maintaining cleanliness to prevent illness in close quarters required strict routines for managing waste and personal hygiene, relying on the ocean itself for sanitation. Imagine trying to stay clean when your bathwater is the Pacific Ocean. There's joke number one. All right, everyone, time for our daily saltwater shower. Don't worry, you get used to the taste. Mostly. Scholars debate the typical size and social organization of the groups of people aboard long Polynesian voyages. How many people typically traveled together on a large double canoe? Was it a small core crew with a few passengers? Or did they carry larger numbers of families and community members? What was the social structure and division of labor among those aboard beyond the navigator and the chief or leader? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand the composition and hierarchy of these traveling communities. Life on the double canoe was a demanding but transformative experience, testing the limits of human endurance, cooperation, and knowledge. It was a shared journey across the vast unknown, where the canoe was a mobile home and a vessel of destiny, carrying the future of a people. Joke number two, you look out at the endless ocean. Another week down, only, oh, who's counting past the dried breadfruit? It was a life defined by the rhythm of the sea, the wind, the sun, and the stars. A constant negotiation with the elements. Joke number three. You feel the canoe rise and fall. Pretty sure my land legs are gone forever. Just call me. Captain Wobbly? Life on the double canoe was a constant rhythm of managing the vessel, rationing supplies, and enduring the elements, all while the navigator held the course using the sky, the sea, and the wind. Weeks might turn into months with no land in sight, a vast, empty blue stretching in every direction. But eventually, if the navigation was true, if the stars and swells led you correctly towards the intended destination, you would reach the critical, often tense phase actively trying to find the target island. Getting the general direction right, sailing towards the correct part of the ocean using celestial navigation and swell patterns, was essential. But the final challenge was locating a tiny island, often just a few square miles, in a vast ocean once you were theoretically close, within a range of maybe 50 to 100 miles. This required switching from open ocean navigation to a focused search for the subtle signs that indicated land was nearby. Polynesian navigators employed a wide and interconnected range of environmental and biological cues during this critical phase, cross-referencing them to confirm the presence and direction of land. These were signs that might go unnoticed by the untrained eye but were loud and clear to the experienced navigator. As we discussed earlier, cloud cues were often the first indicators, visible from the furthest distance. The sight of stationary island cap clouds sitting above the horizon, even when the land itself was hidden, or the subtle lagoon glow of light reflected onto clouds above atolls, were powerful signals that land was in that direction. Sensory details the feel of anticipation in your stomach as you scan the horizon for that specific anchored cloud. Bird cues were equally vital as you got closer. Observing the presence and flight patterns of land-seeking seabirds like terns, noddies, and boobies, knowing they returned to land to roost in the evening and leave in the morning, provided a living arrow pointing towards the nearest island. Following these birds as they headed home in the late afternoon was a common and effective technique for making landfall. Sensory details the visual of birds purposefully flying in one direction, the sound of their calls carrying over the water. Swell changes also provided crucial, non-visual information during the approach. As swells generated by distant weather systems encounter an island, they are disrupted, bending and reflecting and interacting with local waves, creating confused or unusual sea patterns around the landmass. Feeling these changes in the way the canoe handled the waves, noticing swells coming from unexpected directions, was a strong indication that land was nearby, even if still below the horizon. Sensory details the subtle shift in the canoe's motion, feeling different swell patterns interacting beneath the hull. More subtle watercolor and temperature changes could add further confirmation as you got closer. Noticing the water becoming a lighter shade of blue or more greenish, hinting at shallower water or reefs, or feeling a slight change in temperature warmer near shallows or lagoons, added to the growing body of evidence that land was near. Sensory details the visual of a subtle shift in the water's hue, the feel of slightly warmer or cooler water on your hand. Evidence carried on the water was also important. Finding ocean debris like specific types of floating seaweed that grow near shore, or driftwood, leaves, and land plants washing up could indicate that land was somewhere upstream from the debris's position relative to the prevailing currents. Sensory details the visual of floating debris, the feel of pulling a piece of driftwood from the water. And perhaps most viscerally, navigators relied on their sense of smell, downwind of an island, especially a vegetated one or one with bird colonies. The smell of land could be carried by the wind, the scent of earth, vegetation, wood smoke if inhabited, or guano from bird colonies. This could be detected before the land was visible. Imagine sailing for weeks surrounded only by the smell of salt in the sea, and then catching the faint, unmistakable scent of living earth. Sensory details the sudden, profound smell of vegetation or earth on the wind, the feeling of excitement and relief this smell would bring. Finally, as you get closer, you might start to see reflections of the land on the underside of clouds near the horizon, distinct from lagoon glow over atolls. This is from high islands. Or if it's a high island, the dark shape of the landmass might start to loom up from below the horizon, appearing as a dark, solid mass against the sky long before its features are visible. This looming effect occurs due to light refraction and the height of the land. Navigators were trained to look for multiple signs simultaneously and cross-reference them. One sign might be ambiguous, but several signs pointing in the same direction provided increasing certainty that land was near. This phase was one of heightened vigilance, with crew members often assisting the navigator, climbing masts or scanning the horizon intently for any sign. The atmosphere on the canoe would shift from the routine endurance of open ocean travel to a mix of intense hope and anxiety, the tension palpable. Polynesian navigators employed a wide and sophisticated range of interconnected environmental and biological cues, including interpreting specific cloud formations, caps, and glow, observing bird flight patterns, feeling and interpreting swell interactions, detecting subtle watercolor and temperature changes, identifying ocean debris like driftwood, sensing the smell of distant land, and watching for the looming effect of land above the horizon, to detect and accurately locate islands during the critical final stages of a long voyage. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing their multisensory approach to landfall. A quirky tidbit about land detection involves specific traditional names for the stages of approaching land, based on which cues became visible or prominent. There were names for the zone where birds were typically seen, the zone where swell changes became noticeable, and the zone where the smell of land might be detected. Imagine navigating through zones of influence defined by natural signs. There's joke number one. All right, we've passed the mostly just ocean zone and entered the maybe a bird zone. Progress. Scholars debate the relative reliability and practical application of these various land detection cues. While all were part of the system, which signs provided the earliest or most trustworthy indicators of nearby islands, particularly for small or difficult to find landmasses? Was the hierarchy of signs consistent, or did it depend on the type of island sought or the weather conditions? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand which natural whispers were considered the most important for finding home or a new destination. Finding the target island was the culmination of their skills, the tense but hopeful phase where all the natural signs pointed towards the destination. It required patience, acute observation, and the ability to interpret the subtle language of the ocean and the sky, leading to the glorious, long-awaited moment of landfall. Joke number two. You finally see a dark shape on the horizon. Land ho, I think, or maybe just a really big wave. It was the ultimate test of their wayfinding mastery. Joke number three. You take a deep breath, smelling vegetation. The sweet smell of not being lost anymore. Polynesian navigators mastered the art of reading the stars and swells, the wind and clouds, the living world and the water itself, developing a sophisticated system for finding tiny islands across the immense Pacific, connecting a vast oceanic world. But this incredible knowledge, honed over millennia of exploration and passed down through generations of navigators, did not simply continue uninterrupted into the modern era. As the world changed, Polynesian wayfinding faced a period of significant decline, nearly leading to the loss of this invaluable skill. The primary catalyst for this decline was the arrival of Europeans in the Pacific. Beginning in the 16th century and increasing dramatically in the 18th and 19th centuries, Europeans brought with them different technologies for navigation: the magnetic compass, charts drawn on paper, the sextant for measuring celestial angles, and later, chronometers for determining longitude. These tools, particularly the compass and printed charts, offered an alternative way to navigate that, on the surface, might have seemed simpler or more reliable than the complex memorized system of wayfinding, especially for shorter known routes. As European powers established contact and then colonization throughout the Pacific, traditional Polynesian societies were profoundly disrupted. Inter-island voyaging for trade, marriage, and cultural exchange continued in some areas but was often curtailed by colonial authorities, who imposed restrictions on movement or preferred travel by European ships. The traditional social structures that supported the rigorous training of navigators were undermined. Missionaries discouraged traditional practices, sometimes viewing them as pagan. Formal education systems introduced by colonizers did not include traditional wayfinding. Gradually, the practice of long-distance wayfinding began to cease in many island groups. The traditional voyaging canoes were replaced by Western-style vessels. The need for the complex, memorized knowledge lessened as European navigation techniques became available. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the skills of traditional long-distance wayfinding were largely lost in many parts of Polynesia, kept alive only by a few elders in more isolated communities, primarily in parts of Micronesia where traditional culture was less disrupted, like the island of Satawal. This period of decline was so complete in some areas that many outsiders, and sadly, even some Polynesians, came to believe that the incredible voyages of their ancestors must have been accidental, attributing the widespread settlement of the Pacific solely to canoes being randomly blown off course by storms, effectively denying the intentionality and skill of the original navigators revisiting those early prejudice theories we touched on in Section 1. It seemed impossible to many that such vast distances could have been navigated reliably without Western instruments. However, in the late 20th century, a remarkable movement emerged to revive traditional Polynesian wayfinding, driven by a desire to reclaim cultural heritage, prove the capabilities of their ancestors, and reconnect island communities across the Pacific. Researchers, educators, and Polynesian cultural leaders began a deliberate effort to learn and practice the old ways. A key part of this revival was the building of replica voyaging canoes. Most famously, the double-hulled canoe Hokulea, launched in Hawaii in the 1970s by the Polynesian Voyaging Society. These replicas were built using traditional designs and, as much as possible, traditional materials and techniques, bringing the vessels themselves back to life. Then came the challenging process of relearning the navigation. With the knowledge largely lost in Polynesia, navigators from Hawaii and elsewhere traveled to islands like Satawal in Micronesia, where master navigators like Mau Piailug still held the deep, memorized knowledge of the star compass, Swells, and other cues. These modern students became apprentices, learning the ancient system through oral tradition, observation, and practice, much like their ancestors had. Training voyages were undertaken aboard Hokulea and other replica canoes, slowly rebuilding the practical skills of navigating without instruments. The traditional knowledge and practice of Polynesian long-distance wayfinding significantly declined across much of the Pacific after sustained European contact and colonization, due to factors including the introduction of Western navigation technology, disruption of societies, and suppression of traditional practices. However, this knowledge experienced a remarkable and intentional revival in the late 20th century. Led by cultural revitalization efforts, utilizing replica canoes and learning from the few surviving master navigators. This is our mainstream historical fact, covering the arc of decline and revival. A quirky tidbit about the revival involves some of the early training voyages aboard Hokulea. Relearning the practical application of wayfinding after generations of disuse was incredibly challenging. Navigators would practice identifying subtle swell patterns, tracking stars through shifting clouds, and spotting faint land cues, sometimes experiencing the same frustrations and uncertainties their ancestors must have faced. Imagine learning a complex life-or-death skill that hasn't been practiced for a century or more, with the goal of sailing thousands of miles. There's joke number 1. Okay, the star compass says we're going east. The swells say we're going northeast. The birds look confused. I'm pretty sure my grandfather had a chant for this. Scholars debate the primary causes for the significant decline of traditional Polynesian wayfinding after European contact. Was the imposition of colonial rule and its restrictions on movement the overwhelming factor? Was it the perceived superiority and adoption of European navigational technology that led to traditional methods being seen as obsolete? Or was it the disruption of inter-island networks and internal social structures that underpinned the rigorous training system? Scholars also debate the extent to which key traditional knowledge was truly preserved in isolated areas before the modern revival began, and how complete the reconstructed knowledge system is today. This is our open scholarly debate phrase, analyzing the reasons for the loss and the completeness of the regaining of the knowledge. The story of the decline and revival of Polynesian wayfinding is a powerful one, showing how invaluable cultural knowledge can be threatened, but also how it can be deliberately and successfully reclaimed. It moved from being a living practice to being nearly lost history, and then, through dedication and effort, back to a living, practiced skill. Joke number 2. You look at a modern navigator on a replica canoe, studying the stars. He's doing it just like they did. After watching someone else who learned from someone else who remembered a chant, this period highlights the impact of cultural change and the determination to preserve heritage in the face of modernization. Joke number 3. You imagine a conversation between an old master navigator and a young revival student. So you just look at the phone. No chant. No feeling the swells. Interesting. The revival of wayfinding is a testament to the enduring legacy of Polynesian ingenuity and the deep connection to the ocean and the knowledge of the ancestors. The story of Polynesian wayfinding is one of incredible skill, vast courage, and the challenge of conquering the largest ocean on Earth using only the signs of the natural world. It's a story of building remarkable vessels, reading the stars and swells, listening to the wind, watching the clouds and birds, and sensing the subtle changes in the water. It's a story of a profound knowledge system, memorized and passed down through oral tradition, a system that unfortunately faced decline after the arrival of Europeans but was thankfully and deliberately revived. And today, this ancient knowledge is not just a chapter in history books, a relic of the past. It's a living, breathing practice, a vital part of Polynesian cultural identity and a powerful symbol of connection. The revival of traditional wayfinding in the late 20th century was more than just an academic exercise or historical reenactment. It was a powerful movement to reclaim cultural heritage, to restore pride in the incredible achievements of ancestral navigators, and to reestablish connections between scattered island communities across the vast Pacific, using the very pathways their ancestors forged. Successful voyages undertaken using traditional, non-instrument navigation proved unequivocally that the original voyages of exploration and settlement were intentional and possible, silencing outdated theories of accidental drift. Today, master navigators are training a new generation of students in the ancient ways. Replica voyaging canoes like Hakalea continue to undertake long-distance voyages, sailing between islands using only the stars, sun, moon, swells, wind, clouds, and biological cues. These voyages are powerful educational tools, teaching not just the technical skills of navigation, but also traditional values like teamwork, responsibility, resilience, environmental stewardship, and respect for the ocean. Values essential for life aboard a crowded canoe and for the health of the islands themselves. Following a period of significant decline after European contact, traditional Polynesian wayfinding has experienced a vibrant cultural revival and is actively practiced today using replica voyaging canoes and oral tradition, serving as a powerful living symbol of cultural identity, ancestral achievement, inter-island connection, and environmental knowledge. This is our mainstream historical fact, confirming the enduring legacy. Attending a training session or being part of a modern traditional voyage offers a glimpse into the profound knowledge system of the ancestors. You see students learning to identify stars and their rising points by name, feeling the subtle difference between swell patterns, observing the flight of birds, and understanding the complex interplay of natural signs. You feel the motion of the canoe on the open ocean, the wind in the sails, connecting to the experience of ancient voyagers. Sensory details the feel of rough wood and rope on a replica canoe, the sound of traditional chants being sung to help remember star paths, the smell of the open ocean, the visual of a double canoe sailing under the vast sky today, the feeling of pride and connection to the past. The contrast with modern navigation technology is stark. GPS gives you your position instantly from external signals. Ancient wayfinding relies on deep observation, internalization of knowledge, and a profound, intuitive connection to the natural world. While modern methods are essential for safety and efficiency today, the traditional skills offer a different kind of understanding and connection, one that is increasingly valued. Modern aside, imagine explaining the concept of using a smartphone's GPS to an ancient navigator. They'd probably be amazed, but maybe also a little confused why you don't just watch the stars and feel the swells. The continued practice of wayfinding is a testament to human ingenuity, courage, and the power of cultural knowledge to survive and flourish even after periods of suppression. While not everyone in Polynesian cultures today becomes a master navigator, the knowledge exists, the voyages happen, and the story of their ancestors' incredible achievements is actively celebrated and taught. A quirky tidbit from modern revival voyages involves blending old and new. While the navigation is traditional, modern support vessels often accompany the voyaging canoes, staying out of sight of the navigators for safety. Communication, and documentation. Sometimes modern technology is used alongside traditional methods for training or verification purposes, like using GPS to check a course or verify a landfall after the traditional methods have been applied. Imagine a navigator making landfall using only the stars and swells, and then confirming their position on a modern map with a quiet chuckle. There's joke number one. Yeah, the swells brought us right here. See, the GPS confirms it. Mostly. Scholars debate the fidelity of the modern Polynesian wayfinding revival to the ancient practices. While great efforts have been made to learn from the last masters and reconstruct knowledge, has the process of relearning in a different modern context inevitably introduced subtle changes, interpretations, or limitations compared to the wayfinding practiced by ancestral navigators thousands of years ago? Is the revived system a perfect replica or a vibrant, modern continuation built on ancient foundations? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, examining how true the modern practice is to its ancient roots. The enduring legacy of Polynesian wayfinding is more than just history. It's a living connection to a courageous past, a powerful symbol of identity, and a skill that continues to connect islands and people across the vast Pacific today, guided by the stars, the swells, and the knowledge of the ancestors. Joke number two. You watch a replica canoe sail into the distance. They're off following the flight of birds and the feeling of the waves. Good luck explaining that to air traffic control. It's a quiet, powerful continuation of an epic story. Joke number three. You imagine an ancient navigator looking at a modern map. So many lines, and where are the monsters? And now, as our journey through the history and enduring legacy of Polynesian wayfinding comes to a close, you can feel the gentle rocking of a canoe beneath you settling. The sounds of the wind and waves are softening. The stars above are beginning to blur. You can let go of the charts, the cues, the debates about ancient skills and modern revival, all the knowledge, the voyages. The history is resting now, safe in the memory, in the stars above, in the rhythm of the ocean. Peace. Quiet. The vast Pacific is still. The islands are found. Breathing easy. Letting go. Drifting. Sweet dreams.